eruption of the Syrian crisis took almost every power entangled in the Middle East by surprise. The collapse of the Syrian government wasn't so much a successful revolution by opposition forces as it was Assad throwing up his hand and saying, "I'm done. Whoever wants the throne can take it." In this unexpected black swan event, the axis of resistance suffered the most. Hezbollah and Iran were forced to shift their focus from South Lebanon to Syria, desperately trying to keep the supply lines between Iran and Hezbollah intact. This strategic realignment changed the balance of power in the region and had a ripple effect on everyone's interest. On the flip side, Israel emerged as the biggest beneficiary. The ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon held, ceasing tensions for a while. But since the Aqsa flood operation, internal instability in Israel has been building up to a breaking point. Strategically speaking, Israel's best move will be ramp up mobilization and establish a new buffer zone in Syria. But it's not that Israel doesn't want to, they simply can't. They've maxed out their recruitment capacity and have no choice but to pull troops from the southern Lebanon front, like the well-known 35th Paratroopers Brigade and the 89th Commando Brigade. This became clear when Israel announced that its military operations in northern Gaza were winding down. Over the past year, Israel has paid a far higher price than the public admit. The IDF can no longer handle larger-scale operations in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria at once. This has given rise to conspiracy theories suggesting that Israel-Lebanon ceasefire was part of a calculated move to free up forces from Syria, something no one foresaw when the Syria crisis began. But Israel's greed in Syria has been laid bare, and future developments might spiral out of their control. Strangely enough, the most significant victim of this crisis isn't Assad's government. Even before the crisis, Assad's control over Syria was minimal, not even the extension to a small fraction of the country. So his downfall wasn't a shock. This creates a paradox. Assad's regime lacks of funds to pay the army to retake the south-rich Kurds region, which means they can't generate revenue to rebuild the economy. Without economic recovery, there's no money to pay the troops. History shows us that every regime born out of armed revolution first needs a loyal army to secure power. And in the Middle East, that loyalty is built through religion, not secular ideas. This is why nearly every attempt at secularization in the region fails, and that includes Israel and Turkey. Let's be honest, no one would seriously believe that Israel or Turkey are secular states anymore. It's undeniable that every modern nation sacrifices certain groups during pre-modernization to achieve initial capital accumulation. This phenomenon is especially glaring in the Middle East. Developed nations' moral superiority and their criticism of developing countries often stem from this sacrifice, blaming everything on libertarian issues like human rights and the environment. However, a truly modernized country reinvests its capital to complete industrialization and build a self-sustaining economy. Terrorism, on the other hand, is born out of the failure of Middle Eastern countries to achieve this. Blaming it solely on religious extremism misses the point. Terrorism arises when governments fail to modernize and can't meet people's basic needs. Terrorist groups often start with people who've been left behind by modernization. They turn to destruction and looting to achieve their own twisted version of progress. This pattern echoes the age of exploration. When colonizers of that era were essentially the terrorists of their time, they used to plunder and oppression to accumulate wealth but didn't build sustainable industries. When their goods lost competitiveness, they resorted to violence and war to expand their market. This didn't solve their domestic problems. It just spread conflict globally, leading to the First and Second World Wars. Today, Israel's military action in Syria follow a similar playbook. Amid the chaos, Israel exploited the situation to invade Syria and destabilize the region further. This modern form of capital plunder mirrors historical colonial tactics. By combining military aggression with regional stability, Israel aims to protect its strategic interests. But without sustainable modernization, this approach only deepens chaos and fuels broader conflicts. The ones who've actually suffered near devastating blows are Hamas in Gaza. In the foreseeable future, they won't be able to get further support from the axis of resistance, even though Hamas has always been teetering on the brink of collapse. For insurgent groups, the main focus is often on dividing spoils. While they might deflect blaming externally, infighting is more likely. Since 2012, Syria's problems have remained unsolved, especially its economy. Assad couldn't fix it, and HTS can't either. Millions of starving people and barren land are the burden HTS can't handle. Their only option is attacking oil and grain-producing area, controlled by the Kurds and the US. More civil war seems inevitable. Europe faces a second wave of Syrian refugees by 2025, and Turkey will be the first to feel the impact, posing huge uncertainties for Erdogan's rule. Speaking of HTS, some media ridiculously paint them as moderate extremists or even heroes liberating people from Assad's tyranny. These outlets seem to forget HTS evolved from Al-Qaeda, the masterminds behind 911. The leader al-Johani has committed horrified crimes including beheading infants. The US still has a 10 million bounty on his head. It would take at least 10,000 troops and a year to establish a pro-American regime. Given the corruption within US military and failure in Afghanistan and Iraq, it will cost at least $500 billion. I don't think Trump will pay that bill. And as long as Russian-Ukraine conflict continues, the US won't invest heavily in the Middle East. So here we are, Turkey, the EU, the US, the Kurds, and the axis of the resistance, Russian, and even distant China all dreading what's unfolding in Syria. Yet it's happening as if history itself is playing a cruel joke on humanity.